morning, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Art Business Podcast. We're into the summer season. I think actually I know a lot of podcasts in the art world sort of finish at this time of year, because most of the art world is probably not Megan and and Lindsay, whom I'm about to introduce. They probably have to carry on working, but I think I have one more guest coming up who is actually going to be another alumna in a couple of weeks' time, and then we're probably finished until September. But anyway, it's my great pleasure to welcome today's guests, Megan Corcoran Locke and Lindsay Dewar, who's coming up on the screen as ArtTactic, because both Lindsay and Megan do work for ArtTactic. More about that organization later. Sorry, I'm just going to have a swig of water. It's hay fever season for me. And we're going to learn more about their background, but they're both basically alumni of the MA Art Business in London that I'm program director for. So we're going to just dive right in, and I'm going to ask Megan if she can share with us her favorite city and maybe some reasons for that.
Hi, everybody. David, thank you so much for having us on today. I hate to start off on a boring note. This might be a bit of a cliched answer, but London is my favorite city. It had to be something to get me to move away from my home in America. But I'd say the reason for it, having lived in a few different cities, is well, it has a great work-life balance. And for me, a lot of that is weirdly being able to see the sky. I did live and work in New York City for a very long time, and that actually really killed me. That, you know, you couldn't look up and see blue sky without really craning your neck. And I just love, especially in the art world, we're lucky enough to spend a lot of time around Bloomsbury, Mayfair, some really gorgeous parts of the city. So, you know, you're right in the thick of it without feeling like you're you're in a concrete jungle.
Excellent. And Lindsay, are you going to choose the same?
Well, I am biased because I've been born and bred in London, so it is great. But I would say to somewhere else would be Singapore. We spent some time there when I was a child, so it was, you know, as Meg says, kind of great work-life balance. We had a great time. There's a lot you can do there. You're very close to Southeast Asia. You know, the city itself is really exciting. Yeah, so I have very fond memories of there. And I always love going back. The food is just unbelievable there. There's so much you can see and eat.
Absolutely. Actually, I know both of those cities, obviously London, but there was a time, amazingly, when Sotheby's Institute of Art, we did actually have a branch in Singapore. And we used the Southeast Asian educational model for postgraduate, where people would fly in from all over Southeast Asia. Some were in Singapore, some of the students, and they come for an intense week on a certain subject. And that was a period actually when the program, I'm just trying to remember actually whether when you two were on the program, whether we still had the arts and law as a separate core unit. No, so you'd already gone into navigating the art world. Yeah.
Yes.
So anyway, when we were in Singapore, we didn't have any shared curricula, and law and ethics was a separate topic. So Henry Lydiot, you probably remember, he used to go and do an intense law week, and I would go and do an intense ethics and the art world week, which was interesting in Singapore. But I agree, Lindsay, it's a tremendously exciting city, as is New York, but possibly not somewhere that I would prefer over London. So maybe I've complimented both of you. Yeah. And then Megan, do you have kind of binary opposite? Do you have a place you like to escape to that is maybe outside of the metropolis?
So I actually just threw all my eggs into that basket. As much as I love London, I no longer live there. I live on the Isle of Wight full time. So that would be my favorite countryside location. You know, just you kind of get the best of both worlds. My family has, we love boats and horses. So it's kind of the best of everything down here. But I will say that the commute into London is not my favorite. So takes about 3 hours door to door, but we make it work. As Lindsay knows, I'm sometimes in London multiple times a week. So, you know, it's you do what you got to do in order to live in the countryside. So,
and I think if I remember rightly, I think working kind of like independent freelance for ArtTactic. Is that right?
Yes, I kind of have a weird and wonderful assortment of jobs at the moment. Post kids, post COVID. Well, I'm sure we'll talk about career paths a bit later, but in the art world, it's definitely non-traditional. So that's worked out really well for me.
And of course, the post-COVID environment facilitates this more flexible working patterns. Perhaps I know, Lindsay, we'll come to you.
Exactly.
Yeah, you've been working full time, obviously, at ArtTactic. So, do they have a hybrid system there, like days working from home, or do you have to come in every day?
No, we're pretty flexible. Anders loves to sit. He built a special office in his garden, and he likes to be there. So I have to drag him in. So I'm in the office maybe 3 or 4 times a week, and dragging the rest of the team in because I prefer to be in the office. We're in the city. There's a lot going on around here. It's quite nice. We get food stalls outside every day, but we do work from home as well. Yeah,
well, it's sort of similar to I'm in office today, but we still have that hybrid system going, which is really good to be able to do both. And Megan, I share your love of the Isle of Wight. I haven't been for many years, but of course, the reason everyone would be thinking, it's not that far from London, but you have that ferry crossing across the sea.
Oh, it is funny, when people ask how I get into London. It's 15-minute drive from the house, then a ferry, then a bus, then a train, then the tube. So with the exception of a plane, you pretty much cover all the bases.
Yeah, tremendous. And Lindsay, do you have a place like a bolt hole in the countryside or on a beach?
Yeah, I really love the Seven Sisters down in Sussex. So you can do the walk. You start in Seaford and you walk along the cliffs all the way to Eastbourne, and I've done it hundreds of times now. But it's not too far from home. It's only about an hour and a half in the car, and it's just beautiful down there. Like you've got kind of the English countryside and then the sea and the cliffs, and it's just amazing.
And you can almost see the Isle of Wight from there. Maybe not quite.
You can see France, but not quite the Isle of Wight. It's a bit far. Although I can confirm I've been down to stay with Megan, and where she lives is amazing. The Isle of Wight is beautiful.
Thank you.
And
and it's geologically it's very similar, isn't it? Because I often describe the Isle of Wight as like a miniature South Downs, because what you're talking about, Lindsay, is at the end of the South Downs Way, which is a beautiful sort of long distance footpath from inland over in Hampshire, I think, down, and I think it ends at Beachy Head and the Seven Sisters, which is for any listeners who don't know that area, you might know the White Cliffs of Dover, and it's kind of part of that geology with these beautiful white chalk cliffs. And Megan, the Isle of Wight, do you agree? It's like almost like a miniature South Downs with white chalk and grasslands.
Oh yeah. Yeah, particularly on the what's fun about it is the East Coast is much more, traditional sandy beaches, and the west end of the island has the gorgeous white chalky cliffs, beautiful walks. A few sandy beaches, not quite as many. We have some dinosaur footprints. My son loves that. So it's a fun place.
Yeah, no, beautiful. I'm from Kent. And my dad's family were from Fletching in Sussex. It's a little village you may or might. Sussex is a big place. There's East and West Sussex, but so that area I know pretty well anyway, and I've walked along there as well, Lindsay. So the next question is an interesting. We're moving towards art now, but I was just wondering, do you have a favorite building in the world, Megan, and maybe why?
Okay, so I'm gonna cheat again, but I don't have one favorite building, but I'll call it more of an architectural experience. I went to Harvard, and the way that the campus has approached architecture is just really interesting. So I would say Harvard Yard. If you walk into Harvard Yard, you are surrounded by 300 years of architectural history, and they have, some of the most incredible architects over the last few centuries have come in and purpose designed buildings. I definitely appreciated it to an extent as an art history student when I was there, but I think now being out in the working world, anytime I go back to campus and visit, it really is just incredible. Any class that you went into, library, it's every building has an incredible history. So it's kind of like a museum of architecture, but just enclosed in a beautiful green space.
Sounds a little bit like Oxford and Cambridge colleges, which many of which, of course, have built it modern, more contemporary buildings by, international architects, obviously. And Lindsay, do you have a building?
It's a bit different from Megan, but the one that I've always been fascinated by was the Petronas Towers in Kuala Lumpur. When we were kids and we were in Singapore, we would get to go on these trips up to Malaysia, and we'd see these skyscrapers, and they just kind of towered above everything else in the 90s, and they had that little footbridge that went across, and we were like, wow, the buildings are joined in the air. And just so ever since I was a child, I was just sort of amazed by them. And they stand together tall. They're just,
Yeah, I suspect most listeners have a it is an image that we see a lot of in popular cultural media, etc. Yeah, no, I can understand why that's amazing. I get a little bit of vertigo. Have you ever walked across, kind of public walk across that little bridge at the top of the towers?
We certainly didn't, but I don't know if that's because my parents just didn't want to take us up there, or if it's because you're not allowed to. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it must be an amazing view anyway. Yeah, and then music, Megan. I mean, do you have a particular type of music or musician that you're really into?
It depends on my mood. So we'll go on both ends of the spectrum. I'm either listening to Hans Zimmer or a selection of movie scores, or Taylor Swift. I'm one with the Swifties as well. So
have you got a ticket?
I do, and I'm very excited. That's part of it. I'm studying just to make sure that I am. It's funny. I'm much better actually with her. Kind of from 2012 to 2015 albums. I didn't quite have the time to put in multiple runs for her Tortured Poets album. I've been told by my siblings that it's, a 3-hour double album. You have to listen to it in full 3 times before you learn all the words. And with 2 toddlers, I just frankly don't have the time to do that yet. So we're studying, but I'm very excited.
Yeah, and is that at the O2 in London that you're going?
I think it's Wembley.
Oh, it's
I should
Wembley,
know this, so I don't show up at the wrong place.
Yeah, no, because my son said he's going, because he isn't particular Swiftie, but he's got girlfriends who are big Taylor Swift fans, and for some reason he's going twice anyway. So there you go.
Good for him. It's a once in a lifetime experience. We're going to want to say we went in 30 years' time.
Brilliant. And Lindsay, do you have any musical love?
Maybe a bit left field, but I'm very into garage music. I kind of haven't grown out of that yet. I keep expecting to, but here I am, 20 years later, still loving it. I don't know, there's just something about it that's good, and I'm loving. There's a bit of a revival at the moment, and kind of new garage music is coming out, which is great.
Fantastic. Great. Brilliant. So, and now, this is a difficult one, but I often say to people, to guests, Megan, if it's, working in the art world, obviously it's going to be very hard to say whether there's a particular work of art. But if I said to you, like the famous BBC Desert Island Disc program, you can only take one work of art to your desert island to live with on your own, what might that be? And you can cheat a little bit if you like.
Oh gosh, just one work. Oh yeah, I don't know if I can narrow it down to like a genre. I don't know if I have exactly one piece, but yeah, it's funny because I also don't work with it all. But I love 17th century Dutch still lifes. So, I mean, the flower paintings. Every time I walk around Sotheby's or Christie's Old Masters View, I mean, sadly, the ones that I love are somewhere between, 800,000 and 2 million. So I will never be taking it to my desert island, at least not legally. So, but if I could fill my house with them, I absolutely would. And it's funny, it's the only thing that my husband and I can really agree on in terms of art. Yeah, he's a tech guy, but he also loves the Dutch still lives. So
do you mean all still lifes, or particularly the flower paintings?
all the still lives. I mean, if we had to go really narrow, it would be the flowers. Like we actually well, yeah, for copyright reasons and everything, but we found an anonymous still life that we used for our wedding invitation, which we thought might be Willem van Aust, but then I was told by the expert, who I didn't know was the expert, she's just a friend of the gallery, that it definitively was not. So he but
that's a good way around copyright. Yeah.
Yeah, just get it wrong. So yeah, that would be it.
And there's I guess also some of the listeners will have studied that period, but I think you'll agree that what is also interesting about Dutch 17th century still lifes, like their genre scenes, is that they have a lot of underlying meanings. They have symbolism. With the flowers, for example, I often point out to people, and they're very surprised. By the way, these flowers, you've got flowers from all 4 seasons, which can never happen. And I always see that as a signifier of a golden age, because the Greek mythological golden age was the age of gold, was a time when there were no seasons. So I often see that as a kind of signifier of a perfect world, if you like.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. We could do an entire podcast about
about
that, but
and the Memento
we will
Warriors,
save.
obviously.
Yeah.
And Lindsay, what are you gonna answer something completely different? I suspect so.
Yeah, I'm gonna go a bit different. My favorite, I don't know, artist I'm fascinated by is Berthe Morisot. We did so much about her. We did a female gaze module in my undergrad history of art degree, and we really focused on the kind of impressionism. And Berthe Morisot was just, I don't know, so inspirational, and she was a great painter, but she also painted kind of things that we don't see and that we didn't really know about, kind of motherhood and interiors from a female perspective, but also being outside. And that her famous painting on the boat, and it was her and her sister, and they had to be accompanied to go out on a boat so she could paint. And it's just such an interesting period, and she was kind of a really interesting painter for me.
And it's amazing, obviously we're much more aware of those women artists now. I mean, there have been revisions, as you both know very well, from old masters on it's a strange male term, isn't it? But you can't use the female equivalent, unfortunately. Yeah. Although Griselda Pollitt, of course, famously named one of her first feminist art history books Old Mistresses. No, but it's and it's, we might talk about that later, Megan. Why does that term still remain there in the art market in particular? But yeah, I mean, Berthe Morisot is I recently they had that exhibition at the back of the Royal Academy for Impressionist works on paper.
Yeah.
And I agree. But isn't it interesting how they all had to be chaperoned? Like Angelica Kauffman did the grand tour, but she had to be chaperoned the whole time. Yeah. So things have changed.
Definitely. Dulwich Gallery just had an amazing exhibition on Berthe Morisot and kind of the influences that she had and her obsession with the 17th and 18th centuries. And, it was a great one.
What is amazing as well for me at my age is that kind of it used to always be implied that if you put a painting by a woman painter alongside a man painter, somehow the man was always better, a better artist. And that's something that has really changed. So, I mean, particularly for the Artemisia Gentileschi, where basically you're looking at paintings that are as good as, if not better, technically and in terms of subject matter, the male equivalents at the time. So that I think that's something that's really changed. We no longer and the same with classical music as well, which I listen to a lot. Radio 3, the BBC classical music station, they quite rightly play a lot of music by women composers, many of whom I've never heard of. But again, I'm listening to this stuff and I look at it and I used to be kind of, oh, it's a woman, and now of course you just think, wow, that sounds it's good, because I'm trying to get my students now. I hope we reach a time where we don't even think too much about gender anymore.
Yeah.
When we're looking at art, or ethnicity, or sexual orientation, all of those things. Hopefully we'll get to a stage where we don't need to do that anymore. I think we're nearly there, but maybe not quite yet.
Yeah, just have to rewrite some of the textbooks, but they're they're a bit hefty. So
yeah, indeed. And so Lindsay, I'm gonna stay with you for a moment, just to talk a little bit about your educational background. Maybe wait a minute, we have done your favorite work of art, but maybe you could, maybe segueing from that, you could say about when you first started being aware of liking art, and then maybe follow that through with your later education, maybe at school and university in art history.
Well, I was, as I mentioned earlier, I grew up in London, in the suburbs. So I was very lucky to start secondary school the same year that the Tate Modern opened, and it was just the biggest event ever. And we went on 3 school trips to the Tate Modern that year. It was 20 minutes on the train, and they would, throw 100 girls on the train and take us up to London and take us to the Tate Modern. And then they would tell us to come back at lunchtime and show us what we'd drawn. And we were expected to just go around the museum drawing stuff. And they'd ask us to, they'd make us do like some critical thinking about it. So kind of from then we did that. And obviously London's great because museums are free here. So my mum, loves art as well. So she would take us to Tate Britain because we could get the train up there really easily, and she worked near there, so knew a good sandwich shop. So it kind of like fitted into life, just everyday life. There was always art in kind of museums and that kind of thing. So that's what kind of led me into a history of art degree, which I did at Reading, just outside West London. And then from there, someone from the Institute came to give a talk about the Sotheby's Institute of Art Business Masters. And I didn't really know what to do. And it was kind of the 2008-9 recession was still kind of feeling a bit tense in 2010, and people were nervous. And so everyone in my course basically did a master's of some kind. Very few people went into work. So I went straight over to SIA at Bedford Square and did the the art business masters there, and it was great. I really enjoyed it.
That's where I'm sitting now.
Yeah.
It's changed a lot. We're now sharing the building, so our mother company, if I can use that term, now called Branded, based in the United States, we're part now of a portfolio of educational institutions which now include Condé Nast, the fashion, and they do fashion degrees. I remember I used to walk past their place in Soho, and now they're in the building with us. And I think they're going to rebrand themselves as Vogue Educational, because I think it's probably they think it's a sort of better brand name, maybe. I don't know.
More familiar.
Yeah, exactly. So things have changed quite a lot, but the program, we still have a similar number of students every year, like 80 to 90. That hasn't changed that much, I would say. We've been. Did you have electives when you were with us? No, that's what's new. So at the end of the academic year, before the dissertation semester in the summer, students can choose electives in different MAs if they want. So there's a bigger range of possibilities. But as I say, what we've had to lose is the more focus on ethics and law. But although we still do a lot of the law in particular, maybe not so much of the ethics. But coming back to what you said about Tate Modern opening, that makes me feel really old, because that was my first year working for Sotheby's Institute when I was working on their undergraduate degree in fine and decorative arts. It was the art survey called Styles in Art. Wonderful title. I loved it. And when Tate Modern opened, I took my Styles in Art students. There were about 20 of them to Tate Modern the day it opened. I remember we got there really early. There was no one there, and we walked into the Turbine Hall, that amazing exhibition space, and all that we could see was a Louis Bourgeois spider, one of the big stainless steel spiders. And I immediately said to the students, "Okay, we've been talking about site specificity. Why do you think it's this site specific?" And in the end, this building has been a power station that has been unused for many decades. So there's cobwebs and spiders everywhere, and it was a real frisson. I mean, if I'm sure both of you have seen spiders, the large ones. And they send a shiver down your spine, particularly if you don't like spiders, you know, but they're so beautiful at the same time because their mother, I think even the title of it was Mother. But also we were walking around and we saw a vitrine with seashells in it, and you probably both know who that was by, and there's a good story behind that artist's relationship with Tate Modern, where he was offering the works of art for free and suddenly they had to buy this vitrine with the seashells in. It's kind of early exposures to my students to Hirst, Damien Hirst. So that started a big, you know, Megan, talking about coming from the States, I used to go across an interview in Sotheby's Institute, New York. And I remember in 2003-4, I remember having a whole day of interviews with American students, and none of them have heard of Damien Hirst then.
Well, yeah, I was going to say back then it definitely was not on my radar. So yeah, I will confess, not really in the curriculum of what we were looking at.
Yeah, that whole story, it was so interesting. As you know, Anders, your boss at ArtTactic, he comes in and teaches a lot of finance or statistical analysis, art world statistical analysis to students. You'll remember he taught you. You might remember his famous slide taken from a book of the career trajectory of artists and their relationship with the art world, both commercial and non-commercial. So yeah, Damien Hirst is interesting on that. So we were all into him, obviously, in UK Sensation exhibition 98, 99 in Royal Academy, but people abroad still hadn't heard, and so this was another artist that hadn't become internationally renowned yet. So have I interrupted you, Lindsay? Did you want to say any more about
you asked me about my study. I do actually have 2 master's degrees, which
that's right, that interests me.
Slightly excessive, I think, but so I work for a company called Art Bank that have long since folded, and I asked for a pay rise and they said no. So I asked if I could have some on-the-job training in that case, and they said, okay, go and find something related to art. And what I found at the time was Kingston University in southwest London were doing a program called Art Market Appraisal that was approved by RICS, the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors. And you would, if you did that, you could do valuations and you could sign off on the valuations if you did a certain amount of things. And this company, Art Bank, a bit of a headless chicken type of an art company that wants to do everything and ultimately folds. But they said, oh, you could do valuations as part of our advisory services. So off I went and I did a part-time master's at Kingston in what was called Art Market Appraisal. And it was great. It was very similar to the art business program at the Institute. As you know, the art world is not the biggest world, but there was much more of a focus on kind of individual objects and kind of we did a lot of work of like looking at cataloging and how that kind of thing could work. And it was to be honest, it was a nice kind of complement to that.
Who was the director at the time? Was it Nick Tromans or Tom Flynn?
It was Tom Flynn at the time. And in the end I did not get the RICS letters because you had to do an awful lot of valuation work. And as I mentioned, the company Art Bank that paid for me to go there actually folded. So I think they'd have maybe been better off just giving me a pay rise. It might have been cheaper for them. Given that they folded very quickly after. But
luckily they folded, otherwise we'd be being sued. No, but I was actually still an examiner in my role as program director in the Institute. Both, I think, when Nick Tromans, who had also worked at Sotheby, it's a small world at Sotheby's Institute, and Tom, obviously, I knew well, and I think it overlapped a bit when Tom was there as well. But I was an examiner. I was very impressed by the program. Obviously, I saw it as a bit of a rival, I guess, to the MA art business at the Institute. But as you say, it had slightly different emphases and was related to the RICS art appraisal system. Of course, they've changed the name now to compete more with us, to MA Art Business. Yes,
and I believe there's no link with RICS at all. I think that I don't know, no one from my cohort ended up getting letters. So I think that was kind of, it's quite difficult to, have appraise art and objects in the same way that Ricks do. So I think
Yeah.
tough.
Oh no, I was wondering. I saw it for the first time on your LinkedIn profile, and I didn't realize that you'd done that. And I thought, oh, why would she do that? Why would she do this MA? And then, there was a problem with the MA art business maybe? But I can see now how it fits in. Yeah, why not get your workplace to pay for another year or so study? So Megan, what about, you had a traditional art historical education at Harvard University in the States, in Boston.
Yeah. So well, it's funny, just I mean, going back a little bit further than that, very different from Lindsay in terms of my exposure to art. I grew up on Long Island. So even though we were, 45 minutes to an hour from New York City, it is not the most cultural of places. And my parents aren't really into art at all. But I was very lucky. The school I went to, which, well, I guess you guys call it a state school, but in America we call it a public school, had a wonderful teacher who wanted to teach art history. So I really wasn't exposed to, fine art until I was about 16, maybe 17. And I took AP art history when I was in high school and absolutely fell in love with it. And then when I went to university, I was quite determined to do something, in air quotes, useful. So I was going to study economics. And then my father said, please don't do that. Those textbooks never change. You can always learn it. Do something that you will, never be able to learn again in this kind of environment. So in the end, that's why I did go with art history. And obviously, absolutely loved it. Everything was incredible, especially the resources at Harvard. Though I was the one unfortunate year where the Fogg Art Museum was closed for my entire undergraduate experience. They did an amazing job pulling things out of storage. The first ever paper I wrote was on a Van Gogh self-portrait. So I really can't complain because I got to sit in front of it while writing the paper. But it was a bit upsetting. I went back to school after I had graduated and walked into the newly renovated museum, and I did almost start to cry. I did cry when I saw everything that was then on display, what had been in storage for all of those years while I was studying, and I was looking at slides of could have been seeing in person. But hey ho, it happens. It was still an absolutely wonderful experience. But what's interesting, I'm not sure if this is the direction you're going, David, but it's kind of how I ended up in the MA art business. I did try to work in the arts. So I went to my university's career services office and I asked them if they had any guidance. No one in my family did anything in the arts. So I really just had no idea where to start. So I went to the career services office and they said, oh, no, don't do that. You won't make any money. And I was like, well, no, I'm really interested in it. So they gave me a book from 1994 and said, good luck. And that, so for someone who I didn't have any contacts in the art world, didn't know what I was doing, I ended up going into finance. I knew how to do that. That's how I ended up there. But I then remembered the Sotheby's Institute, similar to Lindsay, they did come to Harvard. And that was the one thing the career services office did. You guys gave a talk and I went to it, but, already had a job. So kind of just filed it away. And after being in finance for a few years was like, wait a minute. I remember hearing about something. And yeah, so left my job in sales and trading and moved over to London. And well, yeah, you were leading the program at the time.
The rest is art history. Well, you made obviously
Exactly.
coming to London. You've more than made up. You've more than made up for the lack of the Fogg collection, but it
Yes,
sounds like
absolutely.
that's kind of psychologically damaging, actually, for you know, to actually have something that you know is there and not be a, you know, it's like the myth of Tantalus, isn't it?
I know, it's, you're given the Gombrich textbook and, reading through that and then finding out that actually it could have been on the wall the whole time.
Brilliant. That's a good story, and I remember, and maybe you could and we might come back to Lindsay on this as well. But I was going to ask you about your, well, you know I know about this, but maybe you could tell the audience about your dissertation while you were in the MA Art business, because I think
Yeah,
that led to a career.
it did. Yes. So, well, when I left my job in finance, I convinced my parents that I was going to don't worry, guys, there is art finance. I can work in wealth management. I'm not totally giving up my good job, so don't worry, this will be worth it. But then the institute, as part of art business, you guys made a great assign or project, the collections project, and everyone was randomly assigned a budget, and it went up to 10 million, I think, but I had 150,000 pounds with which to put on an exhibition. And that needed to include all of the expenses and insurance and everything like that. So I was like, okay, what do I do? And then met Stephen Ongpin of Stephen Ongpin Fine Art when we went to Frieze Masters. That was in the first 2 or 3 weeks of the master's program. And he introduced me to drawings. And I remember looking at the price list when I was on his stand at Frieze Masters and being absolutely shocked at, well, not affordable to me, but in the grand scheme of the art world, this is a medium that would be really doable for my project. I loved the works that was on his stand. I remember being very drawn to a drawing by Giacometti, a portrait of James Lord. That was the thing that pulled me onto the stand. And it was the last day of Frieze, so bless him, I think he was a bit tired. And it was the last hour of the fair, but he gave me a catalog and offered to meet me and explain things, and then brought me to an auction, and I was hooked. So it started with the collections project, and then I followed poor Stephen around the globe for about 6 months, to New York, then to TAFE Maastricht, then to the Salon du Dessin in Paris. And I ended up writing my dissertation, to your question, on the market for drawings. And kind of, well, when I say the contemporary market, I mean, the market of the 2000s, as opposed to contemporary drawing.
Yeah, that's always confusing. That's always.
Yeah. So it's basically how has the market evolved, and how did we end up here? And Stephen was hugely helpful, put me in touch with a lot of people to interview. But yeah, it was such an amazing experience, and definitely not what anybody else in our program was interested in. So I was kind of the lone little oddball, looking at old master drawings and going to the British Museum print room and looking at Tiepolo drawings.
Fantastic.
But yeah, it was a lot of fun, and that's how I ended up working at the gallery as well.
It's brilliant. And every year we have usually one or maybe two people that looks at old masters. So and I say to them, look, you're the only person doing this. There's probably sufficient work out there, and it's a wonderful subject, obviously. But I was thinking of there have been other famous students, if I can call them that in air quotes, of the program. Melanie Gurlis, she came from a financial background and got fed up with it. They headhunted people at Oxbridge, and she'd been doing art there, and they just come round on the milk round, and she like so many students art students end up in a big job in finance, make a lot of money, but get fed up with it, and then suddenly realize they can apply. And of course, Anders is another one to a certain extent that used his bank training to move across into the art world and combine the two things. So it's a great story, yeah. And I remember you coming in one day for a tutorial, and you said to me, David, I'm changing my subject matter slightly. what are you going to do? I don't want to just look at old master drawings anymore. Stephen is thinking about now moving from only looking at old master drawings to master drawings, and that's when he famously changed, I think, his gallery subtitle.
Yeah, so so I've been with Stephen now for about 10 years, and his first love was Old Master Italian, 16th and 17th century. But he had always been interested in, that's why it was kind of 500 years of drawings. It just wasn't the sole focus. But yeah, as my dissertation said, the supply of old, incredible old master drawings, rightfully they are being bought up by institutions, but then there just isn't enough to supply the market. And ArtTactic has actually been doing a lot of work looking at single owner collections. Right now, that is what's feeding the old master drawings markets. If a renowned collector unfortunately passes, but then their collection comes to market, that's what gets everybody really excited. And that's usually where some of the prize lots come out if you're looking at the old masters. But more and more, and we actually did a panel discussion this summer about this, but Sotheby's now has a 500 years of master drawings. London Art Week partnered with Trois Crayons, which is a company that is pioneering old master drawings, but even their exhibition was 500 years. So a lot of people are looking a bit more into the present, because the quality of what you can get it's just more accessible. That's not to say that we're not going to find an amazing old master drawing out there, but it's not as easy as it once was. So,
by the way, can you on your screen, and is my screen flashing a bit?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know what that is. It's probably the camera on the. Anyway, I apologize to anyone watching this on YouTube because it's a little bit distracting, and hopefully no one is subject to migraines, but we'll keep going anyway, and then I'll have to see IT to see if they can fix my screen. So sorry about that. No, and of course the other thing, Megan, is it fits into it kind of fits in also to cross collecting, that kind of fashion that was emerging in the new millennium and is still very much around, that you have stuff from different periods and different places and different types of art, etc., etc. So it fits in nicely to that. I do remember the one drawing I really remember, other than a couple of beautiful Tiepolos, as you say, the old master drawings at Stephen Ongpin's. I do remember a beautiful Lucien Freud's with a boat.
The boat at Connemara
on the beach. Yeah.
Yeah, it was one of his very early drawings, and it's funny. As soon as you say it, I can. I'll save the the listeners, but it's the whole story just springs to mind, and you're able to regurgitate it to everybody. So,
yeah, well,
the studying comes back.
The best art, both I think in museums and on the market, has a good story. That's how absolutely. That's one of the reasons it does well. So thank you, Megan. And Lindsay, you've been moving a little bit from that old master drawing sort of niche market, if you like. You were working in several commercial art galleries, including Cynthia Corbett, before becoming a freelance art consultant, joining ArtTactic. Where in 2017, when you joined and as an ArtTactic in East London, in the City of London, that was in 2017, and you were head of analytics then. And recently, congratulations, you've become CEO at ArtTactic.
COO, not CEO. COO.
Oh, COO, Chief Operating Officer. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So can you tell? Oops. Can you tell us something about that journey, and maybe out of that some advice you might give current MA Art business students entering the art world careers for their first time?
Sure. Well, I worked in the gallery at Cynthia Corbett whilst I was doing the MA in art business. It was great to kind of be able to do both at the same time and get like a flavor for what working in the art world is like, as well as learning about kind of the more business side of it. And I think I did a few internships during my master's course, and I found that really invaluable. You know, the career service introduced me to a few, and then there were a few people that I met Cynthia at the Affordable Art Fair, and I said, you know, very green, hi, can I work with you at the next art fair? And then I was working with her at the next art fair. So I think kind of similar to Megan, you know, you meet someone at an art fair, and if you catch them at the right time and you're nice and friendly and take an interest in their work, it's amazing what can happen. And I worked on and off with Cynthia for years and years. We did a lot of different art fairs. We traveled a lot. Her work is mainly with emerging young, I put young in air quotes, artists. They're not all like 20, but you know, they're young relative to the market. And it was great because you get to meet the artists, you get to really experience like something from production right the way through to selling it, hanging it on a client's wall, that sort of thing. But I'd always been quite good with the numbers side of things. I wasn't really into maths at school, and I sort of now wish that I had been more into it. I went to a very selective girls' grammar school, which is still a state school, but it was very high pressured, and I was in the bottom math set. I went on to get an A star. So, you know, this is the kind of level of bottom math set we're talking about. Yeah, we did Sudokus at school. So I always thought I was quite good at that. And then just gradually doing different things, and the kind of advisory and valuations company I worked at, I did a lot of looking at the trends for the valuation. So we'd get in a Picasso, and I'd go on ArtNet and I'd pull all the Picassos, put them in a spreadsheet, work out what had been happening. Should we sell it in like London or New York, that sort of thing. So that's kind of how I turned into this more analytical mode, being not afraid of Excel, which I know a lot of people in the art world are. And I now get to give Meg lessons in Excel, which I think is great. I'm out there trying to tell everyone about data. So I think it's interesting, and it's just a bit different. And then that's kind of how I ended up at ArtTactic. I was freelance for a bit, and several people reintroduced me to Anders. He was my lecturer at the time at the Institute. And then a couple of people emailed Anders and that I'd, you know, had coffees with to say, what should I do with my career now? I don't really know what I'm up to. And then he eventually emailed me and said, enough people have told me about you that let's go for a coffee. And then, you know, I worked on one project. We did this amazing research. It's quite old now, but it was an amazing project. You can still find it on our website, with the company Value My Stuff. And they gave us all their valuations data in every single field, like teddy bears, arms and armor, jewelry, contemporary painting, prints, old masters, absolutely everything. And we made this amazing document where we kind of charted out the rise and fall in valuations that they'd done and average prices, and they had their experts write some expert analysis. So it was a little like herding cats, trying to get all these experts to send in a paragraph about their field. But it was an amazing project to kind of start off with here, and then just kind of paved the way, and I've been here ever since.
Yeah, and it's also interesting, like Megan, that as you yourself flagged, that you know, you get speaking to people at art fairs. It's a good place to begin to network. And I always say to my students, you know, that some people won't be interested in you at all, but that is life. That's human beings. They shouldn't be like that, because they should be they should be professional people. But every now and then, you know, someone gets interested, and that's often how in the art world you end up, you know, in a career. As you know, there's no kind of like orthodox way through the art world, which makes it interesting, but also a little bit daunting, I think, when people are first, you know, coming out of that. Megan, I was just going to ask whether you could, oh, wait a minute, I was just going to ask Lindsay, can you remind me what your dissertation with us was on?
Yes, my one at the Institute was on contemporary art fairs. I can't remember the exact title, but as I mentioned, when I was with Cynthia Corbett, we did a lot of international art fairs. And her model, she was one of the early adopters of having a home gallery. So having the gallery be kind of remote from her home, and then popping up and doing lots of different pop-ups and exhibitions. And it was at a time when art fairs were really kind of starting to take off, and it was becoming clear that galleries were going to need to do art fairs to survive. And that is basically what people said. They said, you know, if we don't do art fairs, how do we meet new people? Because people don't want to come to each individual gallery event in the same way that they used to. They enjoy going to Frieze and meeting all the dealers, or and then they enjoy going to Miami, Basel, and, you know, being in Miami for a week in December is great. And, you know, they get to travel around to nice places, have nice events, and see art and connect in that way. So sort of become essential.
And then now, you know, you all know what happened during COVID and with all the online art fairs, and will bricks and mortar survive? And so far, it seems to me it is. But although there's been a few adaptations, I think, of art fairs in particular, there's also, you know, we focus quite a lot on our the start of the program is now a thing called Art Futures, instead of Navigating the Art World when you were with us. And that is about key current themes, including sustainability. And, you know, we're signed up to the Gallery Coalition ourselves, which you know, MA Art Business, of course, with large number of students, they keep kind of threatening us with, oh, you can't go to Venice. And I'm arguing, well, that's the only flights we do. And, you know, it's so, you know, we're allowed one, I think, but everything else now we're going by, you know, train as much as possible. So we used to fly out to Amsterdam for TFAF, and now everything is on the train there. We also do a couple of UK study trips now as well. So sustainability is another reason why art fairs are having problems, I think. Although you could argue that, as you say, the individual person, instead of having to travel around a lot and use a lot of carbon footprint, they can at least go to Frieze Masters and meet a lot of you know, dealers in one place. But then all of those dealers, the ones from across the world, are obviously having to fly in and ship works in. So it's always a two-edged sword, really. Megan, I was just going to ask if you could, maybe as a freelance person, as a self-employed person at the moment, I think, working in the art world, maybe you could talk about a typical week in the life of, you know, Megan Corcoran Locke. You know, what it's to try and convey some of that excitement that I'm sure you feel working in that world.
Yeah.
Or a day in the life. I don't know, you know, maybe just pick a day from last week and talk about what happens from the moment you get up to the moment you go to bed.
Well, I mean, that's a bit of a funny one because I have two children under the age of 3. So it's Lindsay, she did come and stay with us for a few days, so she has experienced it. I usually get woken up by my son screaming mama from the other room. So I don't need an alarm clock. But I will save all of the domestic bits. But yeah, as a freelancer, I'd say it's and this will be relevant, I'm sure, to a lot of your readers or listeners, excuse me.
Readers.
It's readers, listeners. But I'd say it's a great and terrible thing. And just my personality, I'm probably not the best at managing it. But because I work with, you know, several small companies, and, you know, Lindsay and I are very good friends. My colleagues and I at Stephen Ongpin are very good friends. It kind of ends up with just doing everything all the time. So usually what will happen, the way my day is meant to be structured, is I do ArtTactic in the mornings and gallery in the afternoons. I'm not sure that has ever worked for a single day since I started this in September. But my desk, I have 4 computer screens. I'm not sitting there at the moment because I share an office with my husband since we both work from home. And I just kind of slide back and forth on my chair. My desk is like 1.5 meters long. So I just slide back and forth. But yeah, it's so, you know, kind of wake up or get to my desk in the morning, check in. The ArtTactic team starts earlier than the gallery team. So Lindsay and I are typically on the phone by 8:30, if not before, you know, going through emails, figuring things out, coming up with a plan for, you know, if it's a Monday, the week, or, you know, just that day, because things change so much. We do a lot of bespoke work, which isn't always advertised on ArtTactic's website. So at any given moment, we have about 10 different projects in the pipeline. So between us and Anders, and we have a wonderful new colleague named Margaret. It's where is everybody in their project? How far are we on the research? What's the conversation looking like? Because also a lot of these projects have a very long lead time. So we're trying to plan, 6 to 8 months in advance. But given that we're such a small team, there's only so much you can do at one point. So that's usually where we start our day, and then dive into the research or the nitty gritty at some point, have lunch, then shift gears and do it all again with the gallery. So I'll then hop on a Teams call with Stephen and my colleague Alexa, who is also a director at the gallery, and get a sense of where we are there. Right now we are trying to plan our forward calendar for basically the whole of 2025, because all of the applications are due again 6 to 8 months in advance. We need to figure out what kind of staffing we have, who's going to be in the gallery at any given point, what works we have in stock, and when and where we're going to be able to show them. Do we have time to research? And then doing all of the art fair logistics around that. So again, it's a lot of delegating. It's a lot of working with different people. Everybody has been very gracious with having me work remote with 2 young kids. So I'd say that's the wonderful thing about the art world. But it is complete chaos. So that's,
do the kids sometimes come in? I can see that you're probably in the Isle of Wight at the moment with that kind of whitewash stone walls. Do the kids run in and out the doors sometimes?
Well, so we're very lucky. This is, I'm in, our barn. Yeah, so we do have a separate office. Otherwise, I worked from couch for a while before this was finished. But it's an old farmhouse. The art history folk love it. It's about 500 years old. We went to the archives, and actually we know who's lived here at any given point since 1507. That's what happens when art historians move into old houses.
I'm sure this story is going to be a big story from now post-pandemic across the world, where people are now working from. And, Anders has got an office in his garden. Probably that was during the pandemic, I would imagine. My own problems, I don't have an office. I've wondered whether to put one in the garden, but it's a small garden, and so actually I found this amazing solution, which I'm going to share with people, because it takes 9 to 10 weeks leading to build it, but it's one of these drop down desks where the monitor and all the leads are all built in. There's no mess. So my family will no longer, they can't stand seeing all my plastic bags everywhere with my laptop and my notes everywhere. So from that now on, I'm going to have this drop down thing. And amazingly, we had a big discussion about you can have a work of art on the front of it, so it looks like a painting or a picture on the wall. And we were wondering whether to get like a Piero della Francesca or a Fra Angelico, which looked lovely. And in the end, we just decided on a whiteboard just to sort of write notes on, because we thought we might get fed up with that. I'm just saying that because it's quite interesting the way that art world is even coming into these drop-down desks that people are using who don't have much space,
And the screens that turn into artworks. I have a lot of friends who have done that as well.
That, because that was kind of a digital thing that came in as well, where you can show you could buy. Do you remember Sedition? You could buy, I think they're still around. I've still got a Damien Hirst I paid 10 quid for, although it was an edition of 5,000, like a spot painting that is mine, and I can, I have a license if I want to project it onto a big screen, but I've never done that. I probably don't want everyone to know that I bought a Damien Hirst, who knows, but why not? And Lindsay, just maybe you could just say something about like a day in the life. I mean, Megan's already hinted that you have to get in quite early. I think I met you early once there for coffee in your building in Bishopsgate.
We're in Moorgate,
Moorgate. So, I always get that wrong. Yeah, Moorgate.
Yeah, I mean they're very close. So like I said, we're in a city. Anders and I are early birds, so we love to come in early. Like I probably get in between 7:30 and 8, but like it suits us, so we get in early and we can get stuff done. It often means that we can be finished before we need to talk to anyone in New York, so that the day like the things that need to happen, because a lot of, as Meg mentioned, a lot of what we do is like heavy data and research. So sometimes we do just need to kind of block ourselves away and have some time with an Excel spreadsheet and work out what are we seeing, because sometimes the data is super obvious and you can see a huge upward tick or a huge downward tick, but sometimes you don't see that. And I think one of the things that we really try to do is pull out an interesting story, or a story that doesn't tell the same story as the headline. So I don't want to talk too much about the market, but at the moment we're seeing the market going down. Last year, end of 23, it was down 20%. H1, it's down 27%. But actually, if you dig down into the data, which is kind of what I spend my life doing, online sales were up. I think it was 14%, half one this year compared to half one last year. Philips was only down around 6%. These numbers that you don't see when you only look at the headline are what's interesting. And that's kind of what we spend our time trying to find. So to do so, our database is like nothing you've ever seen. It's huge. It's not huge in terms of how much data we have, because there's only a finite amount of art sales that happen, and we base everything on auction sales. So what we've done instead is we look at it in a really kind of extensive way. We look at who is the artist, when were they born, when did they die, what kind of artworks were they creating, where are they from, kind of all of their biographical information. Then we look at all of the information about the artwork itself. What kind, is it a photo? Is it an oil on canvas? Is it in an edition? Is it really, really big? Is it, those sorts of things. And then we look at the sale information as well. So how much did it sell for? How does that compare against its estimate? Was there a guarantee on that artwork? Is there, were there many, many bidders who were interested in it, which kind of indicates performance and desirability? And then where was it sold? Who sold it? Kind of all these things. So we're able to get kind of a bigger picture rather than, this Picasso sold. So that's
huge amount of variables, including looking at the bidding behavior.
Yeah. So for the big evening sales in London, New York, and Hong Kong, I watch all of them, no matter what time they're on at. So sometimes that means they start at 1 a.m.
Oh, goodness.
5 a.m.
I was going to say, how do you get that data without looking at just watching live?
I watch everything live.
Goodness. So it's 24/7, really.
Yeah, and to be honest, it is fascinating watching them. And when I like the Hong Kong ones because they start at 11 in the morning, so I make everyone in the office watch them with me, and they get very distracted.
No wonder I don't know, I don't know what your alias is on the Art Forecaster, the ArtTactic gamification of the auction world, but I think you're quite good at it.
Yes, I am quite good at it now.
No,
I'm never sure if I'm
how you get good at
it. Yeah.
Obviously.
It's very competitive in the office. And I have to say, I am not the winner because I started in Old Masters and a lot of it is contemporary. So Lindsay, and then we had an intern a few months ago who was also very good at it. And yeah, she and I are family. So, it was definitely hitting my ego a bit. I now go home and study before just read all of our reports, make sure I'm absolutely up to speed, but I still can't beat Lindsay. So
yeah,
if there was an Old Masters one.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but they do occasionally have Old Masters. So just for the audience, in a nutshell, Art Forecaster, you can look it up online. It's a free game that you can play that ArtTactic put out there. Our students, we have like a mini league for them, and I've just sent out some prizes. But it's a very good way of learning about, what's hot, what's not in the art market, because basically you get a number of selected works from different auctions, different types, different auction houses, different parts of the world. Have to take all of those factors into account, and basically you get you have to select a band of a financial band that you think the work's actually going to sell for with the hammer price, and you get a point if you're correct and a 0.5 if you're on the next band. And the problem with it is that it's tempting just to kind of follow use what I call the template, like just play safe and go for the like the lower to middle estimate is a favorite one that people go in for, because then you're not going to fall too far down the leads, because everybody's going to have the similar mark. But risk is actually deciding something is going to be not sell or is going to go over the high end. And I play an equivalent football game, and the same's there. If you play the template, it's just boring. Because you're just going to sit in the same league position. So it's fun just to take risks, and sometimes they pay off, sometimes they don't. What I would say, like with the football game, the Fantasy Premier League thing, the people who win always say that when they're interviewed afterwards, and there's millions and millions of people doing that game, they always say that they're risk takers. There's no point in just choosing all the players. And the same with this art game. So people should check it out. It's good fun. And you learn a lot.
I do. It's one of the, I'd say, kind of hidden gems out there, because everyone asks, what can I do to, improve my knowledge and, in the art world? And people say it over and over again. It's train your eye, see everything that you can. But that's sometimes a bit tough to do if you're not actively engaged. Just watching the auctions isn't necessarily going to do it. So Forecaster is an amazing way. There's only about 10, maybe 15 works for any given quiz. So it's not like you're going through a 150 lot sale, but it just engages you enough for it to really stick in your mind. So yes, to everyone listening, definitely give it a go.
And I've told my students this, that I've experimented with just doing it on instinct, just going through and literally thinking, Lucian Freud, was that, and just going from my experience. But if I then spend more time on each one and look at Art Facts and ArtNet and Art Price and various other places, and look at the auction catalogue, can be very interesting as well. I do better. So it's a good piece of advice to the students, that it is worth using these, doing what you and Lindsay do every day, that getting to know as much as possible about the stats as well as about your instincts. And I would say the art world, and in some ways I think our program is all about understanding the relationship between cultural and financial value, but also just getting as much other information by going around to galleries all the time, talking to people as possible. That's how you actually improve your league rating on Art Forecaster.
Yeah.
Anyway, on behalf of all the listeners, I'd really like to extend thanks to Megan and Lindsay for being my guest today and giving up an hour and a half of their time in, it's basically Monday morning, by the way, so I was going to ask them whether they've already done their planning yet, but maybe they're going to have a virtual coffee after we finish recording and do that.
I don't know.
But thank you so much for that.
Thanks for having
thank you so much for having us.